sessions. People look at me like, what's he going to say next? Okay, well, Steve Hunt, come on up. We're going to have a work session about Valley Regional Transit. And he doesn't say what, so I have an idea, but
Thank you.
welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Commission, I'm glad to be here. My name is Stephen Hunt, Development Director at Valley Regional Transit, and just wanted to provide you all an update on what VRT has been doing over the last year, as well in preparation for our annual request for funding, which we do of each of our funding jurisdictions, ACHTs. So, and I can control the slides from here, is that right?
Okay, here we go. There we are. Perfect.
We're good? If I do that, it goes forward. Perfect. So tonight's presentation, there are just three parts to it. I wanted to provide a highlight of what we have been able to accomplish in 2020, the work that we've done in coordination with ACHD over the past year, and also then talk about the local cost
Stephen,
allocation.
sorry to interrupt you. Could we reshare it? It's not popping up correctly on the Zoom. It's probably the presentation settings. Share settings.
That pauses. That's interesting.
Huh. Yeah, it's not working. Wait.
Hmm?
Good thing you're
I think it might be this.
yeah.
There we go.
Now try to advance. Perfect.
Here.
Okay.
There we go. All right, I think we're good. And I think that's more or less where we need to be. So, right, I was just mentioning that there are three parts to the presentation tonight. I wanted to start with the highlights of what we were able to accomplish in 2020, and then talk about the coordination efforts we've had with ACHD, and then the local cost allocation methodology. So starting with the 2020 highlights, in 2020 we were able to work with our funding partners to increase service on State Street, actually on all three of our best-in-class corridors. That's State Street, Fairview, and Vista, on increasing Saturday and evening services. We also extended the period of 15-minute service on State Street to run a little bit longer. And we continued our coordination with not just ACHD, but ITD, City of Boise, Garden City, Ada County, City of Eagle on State Street coordination. In addition to that, we were able to implement a large portion of the electric bus infrastructure in advance of us receiving our first bunch of electric vehicles later this year. That construction began in 2020. We began our Orchard Facility Master Plan, which looks at how the rest of the Orchard facility will accommodate additional growth and further conversion to electric vehicles. We also launched CityGo in 2020, which is a transportation cooperative in downtown Boise, looking for ways to encourage more people to take alternative modes of transportation, including transit, but also vanpool, carpool, bike and walk to work. And we did a website redesign to make it easier for people to see where transit services are and get information about Valley Regional Transit. We updated our transit schedules to make the paper schedules more legible, have people understand when they pick up the schedule at a glance, what does the service do, what does it connect to, how often does it come, all in an effort to make the service more understandable to the public. And we made improvements to our on-time performance by adjusting our schedules and coordinating a pandemic, which got rid of traffic so we could get through faster. We didn't really do that, but the result was we did have better on-time performance, in part because of the reduction in traffic. Next slide, note to myself. So 2020 though was highlighted by COVID-19 and our response to it. There were a number of things that we did to react to the pandemic. One was we stopped collecting fares to ensure that people were able to maintain more distance between the driver and the passengers, reduce the opportunity for transmission there. We also closed Main Street Station, again, to encourage more social distancing. We implemented mask requirements on the buses, and more importantly, we did more cleaning of both our facilities and all of our vehicles to ensure that the public would be able to ride transit services safely. We implemented, as did everybody else, remote working and meetings. We continued to hold our meetings, but did so remotely, as you all have done. We also implemented a newsletter called Safe Travels Treasure Valley, which was a pretty, I think it was an innovative thing, not so much innovative, but an important thing that we did with our riding public to share what it is that the VRT is doing, as well as the other partners, ACHD Commuter Ride in particular, to ensure that people were able to continue to travel during the COVID times in a safe manner. We also, in October, that's right, October of last year, implemented our first on-demand service in Canyon County. Also, in response to COVID, we pivoted to receiving and then using CARES funds, and those resources were used to increase sanitation, provide masks for the riding public, also offset any loss of fares or local revenue, and to maintain operations both in Canyon and in Ada County. And we were able to restructure our funds to further advance local priorities in both counties. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the work that we've done in coordination with ACHD over the last year and looking a little bit into 2021. So we, as part of the pandemic, when we closed Main Street Station, we worked closely with ACHD to close Main Street and make room on 9th to where we had all of our service operating at the surface level. So we worked with ACHD to get the right traffic controls in place for that. We made improvements to 32 different bus stops in Boise, Meridian, and Eagle, and a lot of those stops actually helped improve ADA compliance, both to and immediately adjacent to the bus stop. And those were done in coordination with ACHD. We partnered with ACHD on a study that was actually run by CCDC on Main and Fairview transit islands, which is still ongoing, and we participated in design reviews. These are just a couple that I wanted to mention that impacted VRT operations. These are all projects that were done by ACHD, but the Maple Grove work, downtown Boise efforts, and the Orchard Street alignment, we participated in those efforts. We also, this year, participated more directly in the integrated 5-year work plan for ACHD, so that's actually 2021. We were able to provide priorities for VRT relative to ACHD's work plan, and so we very much appreciate that opportunity, and we're able to do that this year. We coordinated with ACHD staff on the State Street Alternative Analysis, which I presented on last time I was here, actually 2 times ago, and we initiated the State Street Transit Operational Analysis this year with input from ACHD staff on the scope and purpose of that project. Last time I was here, we talked about the federal earmarks application, which we submitted and is currently underway. That was for State Street services, State Street transit amenities. We also worked with ACHD staff on the Compass Park and Ride study, which wrapped up last year, and we're initiating a regional van pool study this year, and are in coordination with ACHD Commuter Ride staff on that as well. So a lot of things going on between the agencies, and we really appreciate the work that ACHD is able to do with VRT. When we talk next about the local cost allocation, but I think it's been mentioned here before, and I just want to highlight that the real value that we have between the agencies is in that planning coordination and in the infrastructure that ACHD does provide, which is far more valuable than the current levels of financial contribution, and just want to acknowledge the work that goes into that and appreciate you guys in that. So last part of the presentation, just talking about the local cost allocation model. So this is an effort that we started, I think, in 2018 to update how we distribute costs among our funding partners. There are three components to that: what we call regional overhead, which addresses the administration and finance, those transit planning and customer service and IT, things that are spread across the agency that aren't specific to a service. Those costs are carved off the top and distributed among all of our funding partners. And then we have specific allocation of our services based on where they run. And then capital costs are also distributed according to where services are provided. This little flow chart is intended to show how we apply that local cost allocation methodology and how we come up with, in ACHD's part, I guess I should have mentioned in the last slide, we do not charge any specific cost for service or capital to ACHD. We're just focusing on the regional overhead, and we can talk more about that if there are questions. But this is intended just to give an overview of our total cost allocation model. So we start with all of our expenses, and then we subtract any of the known revenues for that. So those include any special allocations where we know that there's a project that a jurisdiction or funding partner is interested in funding. We take those costs off the top. That also included in revenues or anything related to fares and federal funds. Those costs come off the top. That identifies what is left to be funded by our local funding partners. And again, those are categorized into the three sections of regional overhead, services, and capital. And then we categorize those expenses to our partners in either general, service, or capital. It's the same. And we distribute those costs either by population or share of revenue miles, or in the case of ACHD and other non-population partners, there is a set amount that I think it's about 7% of the regional overhead that we distribute among our non-population partners. The result of all of that is we have a local request that we make of each of our partners. In the case of ACHD this year, our preliminary budget has that at $5,420. Just a word more about our non-population partners. This is a list of them here. Mostly they are highway districts in Ada and Canyon County, but they also include universities, the College of Western Idaho, and Capital Development Corporations, both CCDC and Meridian Development Corporation. So we take that 7% and divide those regional expenses equally among our non-population partners. A little more complicated than that, but for Ada County, that's the case. Canyon County, we treat Canyon County highway districts the same as we do ACHD. They're viewed as one partner, so we distribute essentially that 7% among 6 partners, and then further divide that Canyon County portion among the highway districts in Canyon County. So what I wanted to show here is just how all of those costs then are distributed among our funding partners. You can see again, we have a general assessment that we request of each of our funding partners, service assessment among those that have services that are directly provided to those partners, whether that's jurisdictions or in the case of the universities, they directly fund some connections between the universities. And then capital assessment is associated with each of those service partners, and we distribute those capital requirements among our service partners. And any special assessment, if there's a particular study, if there is a particular project that a jurisdiction wants funded, and we route that through our special assessment, and then we get to the total. So I believe that is what I had to share with you, and appreciate the opportunity to answer any questions.
I have
I'll
one.
do that now.
Has to do with other universities in Canyon County. Are they not considered partners for these purposes because of their tax status?
Thank you, Mr. President. They're not included, not because of tax status. So our non-population partners and our institutions tend to be more kind of relational. We've had a partnership with Boise State for a long time. They provided specific money for services, same with CWI, and that's how they became part of this non-population partner group. We are working with Canyon County institutions of higher education to have pass programs, but we haven't discussed with them, at least to my knowledge, in the short term, any further partnership beyond a pass program. Say with College of Idaho, we actually just, through the work of CityGo, did enter into a pass program with them, but not a full partnership program with them or NNU. That
Okay.
could be an opportunity in the future.
Mr. President?
Yep.
Stephen, thank you so much for coming in your presentation. I'm really impressed with just your flexibility as an agency, ushering in, experiencing the pandemic and how that has impacted transit organizations across the country. It's been pretty devastating in some instances. So I've just been really impressed with your ability to be flexible and improve the things that you can while ridership is low and that sort of thing. I do have a couple questions about what is, like, could you give me like an essence of what is the State Street operational analysis? Like, what does that, like, what's the scope of some of those analyses that you mentioned?
Thank you, Commissioner Peckering. The State Street Transit Operational Analysis is a study that we initiated in consultation with our other State Street partners, and the purpose of that was to look at the State Street Transit Traffic and Transit, or TTOP, Transit and Traffic Operations Plan, and the projects that were in there. We identified some areas that needed revision, or we thought needed revision. And so the transit operational analysis will look specifically at the role that the HOV lane as defined in the T-top will play, also looking at bus pullouts. It also is intended to look kind of in the short term at what can be done to help transit move more quickly through the corridor with the construction of VMP and Collister intersections, and how we can keep moving towards the regional vision we have of State Street as a heavily emphasized transit corridor.
Gotcha. And then you mentioned peak frequency on state. So what did that look like during the pandemic? Like, how often was that happening? Or could you explain that to me?
Sure. So we've been, it's long been a priority of the city of Boise to get State Street, Vista, and Fairview up to 15-minute services all day. And we had been working first on State Street. So there was a period of time, a window of time in the AM and PM where it ran at 15 minutes. We were able to extend that another hour and a half, this was all planned prior to the pandemic. We delayed that about 6 months and then implemented in October those additional hours. You asked about what happened during the pandemic. One of the things that was interesting is to ensure proper social distancing, we ended up running 15-minute service in the middle of the day as well on State Street, because that's where it runs at 30 minutes. And so we doubled the service there to just ensure that we didn't have any overcrowding during the pandemic.
And obviously it's hard with data collection during this initial phase of the pandemic, right? I'm just curious, were there any findings with increasing that peak service, regardless or despite the pandemic, that you'd be willing to share?
Mr. Peckering, the biggest thing that we saw with the pandemic is really the decline in demand during the peak period, right? And so, which turned everything kind of on its head. Typically, when you look at a demand profile, you'll see two peaks. It's the same that you all see with traffic. You'll see an AM peak and a PM peak, and less traffic in the middle of the day. The PM peak is a little bit longer and higher than the AM peak. But when the pandemic hit, almost like within 2 weeks, those two peaks became just one hill. And our highest ridership was actually about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And we've seen a continued interest in midday and all-day transit needs as opposed to a focus solely on the peak periods, which continues a trend that we'd seen prior to the pandemic in terms of interest in all-day travel, off-peak travel, whether that's evening or weekend. But we've, I think, seen that be more pronounced since the pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I just want to extend my thanks to Stephen. Excellent presentation. I'm eager to hear about the results of the request to Congressman Simpson. I think the key is that since this is one of the biggest urban areas without a robust transit system, without a high-capacity transit system, people don't know what it's like until they see it. So that's so critical. And I think this agency and all agencies should be partnering to make that happen, because what you do, what Valley Regional Transit does, is ensure efficiency on a right-of-way, because it meets a transportation demand that isn't necessarily met. Well, it isn't met just simply by adding capacity for single occupancy. It really has to be about the efficiency. So I really appreciate the work you're doing and the partnership, and I hope, since it's the right-of-way that is managed by ACHD, that where VRT operates, it just makes sense. I'm always amazed at the request to ACHD is so teeny tiny in terms of financial support. But I do hope that we can work closer together in helping to fund some of the facilities that are critical to make it happen along the right-of-way, because we manage the right-of-way for a variety of reasons. And moving people is our key goal, is to move people. And I think we've got to do it. Even though we have two different jurisdictions and it's unique in the world and FTA can't quite figure out who we are, we ought to be able to prove that we can do this between these two agencies. And the work you're doing is really good to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it, as usual.
Mr. President,
Yes.
before we end, I just have a couple of quick questions. You alluded to it briefly in the questions with Commissioner Pickering. As far as ridership numbers, total ridership numbers for 2020, do we have those numbers, and how much did ridership change in 2020?
Commissioner McKinney, we do have those numbers, and the interesting thing about 2020 is half of it was pre-pandemic, half of it was post-pandemic. We were seeing ridership growth in the first 6 months of the 5-ish months of the year, which is also where we see most of the ridership that we experience in the year. The first 6 months is about 60% of our annual ridership. So in addition to that, we had transitioned over to APC units to do our passenger counting, which typically has about a 10 to 15% increase over the previous ridership calculation methodology we had, which is using the GFI fare boxes. All that to say, in the end, 2020 was about, if I remember correctly, region-wide was about less than 10% off of 19. I want to say 3, but because I don't remember exactly. It was less than 10% off of 2019. We know we're going to be quite a bit farther off of that in 2021 because we'll have a full year in the pandemic. We are down about 40 to 50% right now in looking into 2021 for ridership. So some of those are off more than others. I mentioned the peak period ridership. So some of our routes that were oriented towards that peak market are experiencing as much as 75, almost 80% decline in ridership compared to the pre-pandemic numbers. We expect to see those come back as COVID restrictions are lifted and the people are returning to work, but it's everybody's guess a little bit as to what that will look like in the future.
Okay, so basically what we had is, because of the pandemic, of course, ridership dropped off, though the increase in some of the services was planned before that all started, and that's kind of where things came out. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mr. President,
Yes.
sorry, I have a clarifying question off of what
Yes.
what are APC units and GFI fare boxes?
Sorry. APC is automatic passenger counters.
Okay.
GFI, I don't know, it's GenFare. I could make it up. It's GenFare Fares International. I don't know what it really is, but it's the machine
Hence my question.
that we use to collect fares. And
Okay.
so typically when a person gets on the bus, they'll either put cash or show a pass through the GFI fare box. GFI is the company name. Fare box is the generic. And that's what we had been using in the past to collect ridership data. And that's been known to typically undercount ridership. And so when we transitioned from using the fare boxes to the automatic passenger counters as our ridership estimator, we saw that increase. So between everything I was mentioning before, the growth in ridership up to the pandemic, transitioning to GFI fare boxes, system-wide, we ended up being off not that much. In Ada County specifically, we actually were about a 1% over where we were in 2019, in 2020. But that hides a lot, and we absolutely saw a big decline in ridership with the pandemic, and in 2021 we'll see that more clearly.
Thank you.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I just wanted to say thanks, Stephen, appreciate the update, and I too am going to be very interested to see what the numbers do as we recalibrate and come out as things start up, so that will be interesting. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Thank you.
All right, work session number 2 is on Rose Hill Street and Owyhee Street, Overland and Vista concept studies. And presentation by staff, so I figured we were in for just being surprised, and now I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
I got sharing. There we go. Show presentation mode. We're good.
We're good. Okay. Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. Christy Inselman with our Planning and Projects Department. Sorry, I always say programming because that's all I'm doing right now. Maybe programming of the brain. So this evening I'm here to present to you the public comment review that we've on 2 concept studies that we're developing this year, and it's a Rose Hill and Owyhee intersection and the Vista and Overland intersection. So just as a reminder, the Rose Hill and Owyhee intersection, our consulting firm on that one is Kittleson and Associates. On the Overland and Vista intersection, it is Kimley Horn. This looks familiar to you, I'm sure. I brought this back to you a few months ago as to just the initial introduction of these projects. And so just as a reminder, Rose Hill and Owyhee intersection, we're looking at doing some improvements to that intersection for those that walk and bike, so increasing that safety there. There are schools in the area that this is within the walk zone. There's Jefferson, South Junior, Monroe, Sacred Heart. There's also a park in the area, so it's a heavily used intersection. So the alternatives that we're looking at, we will come back to you again with those alternatives. And we're looking at mini roundabout and possibly an enhanced crossing at that intersection. And just as a reminder, currently that intersection is only stop controlled on the Owyhee street legs. Rose Hill is a through street, as well as being an arterial. Okay, there we go. It didn't want to move forward. So we conducted a public outreach on this concept study to find out what the neighbors and users of the intersection wanted to see. We held stakeholder meetings between March 15th through the 31st, met with property owners, we met with the school district, and we met with neighborhood groups. We also conducted an online survey between March 22nd and April 5th, and we received a total of 278 comments, with 83% of those who responded live in the neighborhood, which was a great response for a concept study. We were very excited to see that. The majority of those respondents, 68%, I don't know why my slide says that, but 68% agreed that improvements are needed for those that walk and bike. The percentages for the not sure were about 15, and then I think 17 for the no, even though my percentages aren't showing for some reason. So the results of the survey did reveal that the majority of the concerns were vehicles not yielding to cyclists and pedestrians. It was an interesting response to the survey because we also learned that the crossing didn't feel visible to drivers, and there was limited sight distance, as well as vehicle speeds. Another thing that came out of the survey were turning movements. There were difficulties either getting off of Owyhee or getting either onto or off of Rose Hill. So what did the public want to see at this intersection? They wanted to see safer crossing conditions for those that walk and bike. They want to see increased visibility, for the crossing and better sight distance around that intersection. They would like to see slower speeds. We did do an analysis, and they are speeding on that road. It's on average, it's about 5 over. The posted speed limit for that section is 30 miles an hour. And they would also like to see an improved vehicle turning movements both on and off Rose Hill. And then Overland and Vista. Again, this slide probably looks familiar to you. For this one, the goal of the concept study was to improve the intersection for those that walk, bike, and drive. And just as a reminder, we have this wonderful free-ish running right turn lane, southbound Vista. The intersection, the problem with this is because there is no receiving lane. Cars that are traveling south they have to yield to that traffic traveling west on Overland Road. Because there are residential homes all along that right turn lane, it's made it difficult for them to enter or leave their properties. All the stars that are on this represent all of the driveways that are located, residential driveways located on that roadway. There's also a bus stop in that triangular island, so the bus will stop there, back traffic up, and you get a lot of pedestrian traffic getting to that bus stop. Similar to the Rose Hill and Owyhee, there are quite a few schools and parks in the area. There's a Whitney, South Junior, Monroe, Hawthorne. The Bowden Park is also within that same area. And then the Terry Day site. There's also a STEP program that's located just north of this intersection that utilizes this intersection heavily as part of their program. We conducted a public outreach similar to the Rose Hill and Owyhee. It followed the same timelines. So we held those stakeholder meetings between March 15th and March 31st. And we held those with property owners, business owners, school districts, principals of the schools, and neighborhood groups in the area. We also conducted the online survey between March 22nd and April 5th. Total comments we received were 219. So again, we received really great outreach from the public on this intersection. Half of my percentages are working on this one. So that's super helpful. So the majority of the respondents agreed that 60% agreed that improvements are needed for those that walk and bike, and 40% agreeing that improvements are needed for those that drive. And this, again, it was a great response. 82% of those that responded live in the neighborhood, so we know we're getting good results from them.
Christy,
Yes.
what are the people that driving concerned about?
People that were driving they were concerned about the intersection, and there were a lot of rear end accidents. They still wanted to be able to make turning movements. They didn't want necessarily that restricted, but they were concerned about those rear ends because people trying to turn on that were stopping to try to yield to traffic or stopping to try to yield to somebody turning into their homes, and there was a lot of conflict in that. So that's what I heard majority from the drivers was that concern. So what did they want to see at the Overland to Vista intersection? Vast majority remove the free running right and replace it with a traditional turn lane. We did do a turn lane analysis on that right turn lane, and it is needed given the volumes that actually make that movement. They also asked to relocate the bus stop to the south side of the intersection, and we have been in communication with VRT, and they're in favor of moving that. When we come out with the concepts, we'll show some locations of where that potential bus stop could be, and the shelter that's existing there is something that can be relocated. And that is their route. It's southbound on Vista. So if we relocate it to the south side of the intersection, it's still part of their route. And the other thing they wanted to see was improvements to the pedestrian and bike facilities. So the next steps in this process are development of those concepts. The first one that will be coming back for the public information meeting will be the Overland and Vista, and that will be on June 17th, which will begin the two-week comment period for the public. They can review those concepts, provide feedback, and then we'll come back to the commission, we believe in September, with the alternatives for your consideration. The Rose Hill and Owyhee will be having that public information on July 22nd, again, 2-week comment period. We'll follow that. And then we anticipate coming back to the commission on that one. It's likely going to be October. So we have time to review all of those results before we bring those alternatives to you. And I will stand for any questions.
I don't have any. I know there's a lot of stuff going on as far as taking looks at what's at the neighborhoods, so I'll reserve judgment or questions until after that. Anybody else?
I have a question. Sorry. Christy, I'm just curious, like with and I know I'm not a planner or a road engineer, but I'm wondering though with like the impetus of looking at the Overland and Vista intersection in particular, and just the conflicts of that free running right with those driveways, and then your comment about how necessary it is. To me, it feels a little disingenuous that we're going down this path, that we're interested in knowing how to support those folks and improve that safety, and yet, well, the data shows that we really shouldn't even consider that. So is there, I mean, is that what I'm hearing, or?
Well, so what we're looking at doing is removing that free running right. And replacing it with more of a traditional right turn lane. It wouldn't be a very long right turn lane. And then providing an alternative to those residents. So some of the alternatives that we're looking at are I keep calling it a backage road, but it's really a frontage road. And that would be, and all of the residents are on that curve, are supportive of doing that. We met with all of them, and that would be, they would have an access off of Overland, off of Vista would be completely closed, and they would come in and it would serve, I believe it's 3 or 4 homes that would have that frontage road. So it's a completely different configuration than what is existing today.
Gotcha.
It'll remove several of the conflict points of people stopping and thinking they can just run right through that intersection. It'll be a more standard design as far as getting the vehicular movements turning and less conflict with pedestrians. Because as it is now, there's not the greatest crossing there for pedestrians across that free running right. And I've talked to several of our advisory groups, and that was several comments. They were like, we rode that or we walked that, and that was very scary to get across that. We're closing that off and getting them down to the intersection where they're more visible, and getting those crossings there is going to be a better solution than what we have today.
Perfect. That makes a world of difference. I just didn't want to get the impression that it's like, oh, well, we're really not going to even look at reconfiguring that section of the intersection. So thank you for that detail.
Yeah, and Mr. President, I appreciate that Christy's done a great job and did this presentation to the bike committee and the pedestrian committee, and I'm real familiar with this neighborhood. And one of the concerns that I had, and so I asked neighbors, and we did a walk down there, was part of the reason vehicles don't see people at that intersection, they're not paying attention, is a lot of the cues that they get on Rose Hill as they approach, both from the east and the west. So I went for a walk along it, and sure enough, there are several points at which, because those of you who are familiar with it, it's Franklin. It goes all the way to the county line. It's Franklin that then changes into a neighborhood road. And as you can see, at some point, it was sort of curved and connected. I don't know if it was disconnected at some point, but over there at Roosevelt, it's connected now. So it's a through street. Unlike some of the other bench streets, it is used as the main connection through. So part of what I hope we can consider is including things that draw people's attention to where they're driving. Many of the same things were the ideas that we're using on Kootenai. So I appreciate Chrissy's going to go for a walk with me on Friday and look at that, and because I have a memory of, and I don't know if anybody was still here then, probably Price. We put temporary road traffic circles on north of you, which was my route to church. And as a driver on that, I thought, where did these come from? Yeah. The neighborhoods, I guess, asked for them, but we didn't sort of prep people, or the rest of the road wasn't altered, and so they were removed almost as soon as they were up. And I don't want there to be pushback from the public, because they're not going to change their perception of the road until they get to Owyhee, and then it's like, whoa, what's happened? What's changed? they have to change their perception as they approach that road. And so I'm hoping we can integrate into this project some measures, even if they're temporary, on Rose Hill. And we can talk about those. The more information, the better. That's my views. Is there's not too, you can't have too much information and perception about a neighborhood road, because once we start putting the concrete in, it stays.
Yeah, and Mr. President, Commissioners, I think I failed to mention that. The Rose Hill in Owyhee is a little unique as well, in that it's an arterial roadway, but it's front on homes, and there's
Yes.
on-street parking. It's a unique situation there, even though it is an arterial, and it does connect, and it does provide east-west connectivity. It's a unique situation, and one of the reasons, too, that we were looking at the mini roundabout, it's a smaller footprint and much less impacts to the four corners, the homes that are there.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough, because that'll be the first mini roundabout ever, and it's just like, if we want it to work, we need to make sure everything works in that, because we will get lots of pushback. Looking at the other thing is, we've lived with this crazy, right turn for generations, and the other four corners have been developed. And there's actually buildings right on the corners
Yep.
of the other three corners of the four. Boise is also looking at trying to encourage people to put in ADUs. The price of those properties is very valuable, but it's so funky. They don't have alley access. What I'd like to do is do a little more exploration about what are the land use possibilities with the land use agencies, rather than us basically creating what would be a private driveway at public expense, when maybe if they got together and they said, actually, in the long term, if they actually talk to each other, we would prefer back access, and we'd have to do that. And then we'd say, well, then we don't need this in front of you. We'll vacate it. You can have that for your property to build on, and put it on the tax rolls, and we'll have an alley. But they have to figure that out. My concern is, if we put a lot of money into this, then we postpone that for another 50 years addressing that issue, and it's going to be hard to do. I think it might be nice to figure out a way to vacate this property so that it can be returned to the tax rolls, or at least exchange it for a traditional alley behind these houses. But because we don't do this land use, and we haven't gotten involved with all those sorts of things, those are the kinds of things that probably haven't been explored with the homeowners, because we're looking at it from just a traffic standpoint and the safety, which is totally true. And I think maybe while that's going on, we could do a safety measure and block the turning on there, and just have people go down. And we're going to get pushback, because there's drivers, commuters who are using that lane. But it'll prepare them for the fact that that's ultimately what we're going to do. Put a temporary installation in there, and then encourage whoever it is to put them together and say, is this something, because you've got an asset here that's very valuable, and it might be even more valuable if it was designed differently, with this property in front and you had access in the back. And if you all got together and figured out a solution, we'll just come back and say, well, this is what would have been a cost for us to put a frontage road in. We'll put that on the table, and you come up with the rest and solve this problem. I think that might work better in the long run. I'm just a little concerned about whether, if we put something firm in that just deals with the safety, which I agree with, of that turning lane, we get another 50 years before those property owners ultimately figure out, front-on housing with driveways that close together on Vista and on Overland don't work.
Okay.
Mr. President, I
Mary?
just want to say, Christy, thanks so much. It's great to see you in person.
Good to see you.
Always appreciate your updates, and look forward to the additional feedback and having you back before us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're hoping to bring some really great concepts to you
Oh,
soon.
I have no doubt you will. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, then we will go into our pre-commission meeting. I'd like to ask the commission if there are any questions or comments about our agenda. If there's none, in that case, we'll turn the time over to the director for his report.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. Good afternoon. A couple things to share with you. As you know, we've been watching economic statistics here very, very quickly, very forcefully. And this morning, the world's greatest treasure on the planet handed me an update on operations. I'd like to share a couple of these things with you before we go into the rest of this presentation. We're looking at costs. And right now, for asphalt, including liquid additives, they're up 9.3% from last year. Ready-mix concrete is up 5.3% for this region. The iron and steel costs for this region are up 67% from last year. Construction materials up 23.8% from this time last year. Food and beverages are up 3.2%. The transportation costs are up 13.6% from this point last year. Unleaded gas nationally is up 54.7%. Local is up only 51.6% from this point last year. The AAA tells us that Memorial Day travelers will pay the highest gas prices since 2014 over the holiday. This will hit home to all of you. It's about property and residential areas. Existing residential listings are down 68.3%. There's no lineup there going in. Existing homes sold average price was up 49.3% from this time last year. Let me say that again, 49.3%. Is it a wonder that people are second-guessing opportunities to come to Ada County to join any team across the board? Newly constructed residential listings are down 81%. Again, there's no bench there at all. No pun intended, Commissioner Hanson, and such bench. You got it. Okay, good. The newly constructed home sold average price is up 14.8%, and 80% of the single-family residentials, existing and new construction, sold in April 21 were sold for over $400,000 compared to just 41% of those sold at that cost last year. So as we continue to update you across the board, you'll get this monthly and such when we do our metrics review. But as you can see, everybody is facing an interesting dynamic challenge when it comes down to operations, team members, retention, recruiting, you name it, across the board. As I've said for the last couple of weeks, we got to be bold. We have to be innovative. We have to be flexible, and we have to explore new concepts, or nothing will get done when it's all said and done across the board. Commissioners, I shared a couple of these yesterday at the all staff, and I wanted to share some of these statistics with you again for your review. Next slide, Stacy, please. Key dates in May and June that we're focused on across the board. Again, the chip sealing begins 1 June. As I shared with you earlier, we have 20 senior NCOs coming in from Mountain Home Air Force Base to talk to us on June 10th with subjects anywhere from annual assessments, feedback, how do you deal with different generations in an operation and such. We're going to talk a little bit about leadership, but this is just a great thing to have that tremendous group of warriors coming to the Ada County Highway District. Also on the 10th, we have the Commercial Developers Advisory Meeting. It starts at 10. We'll have for those of you that wish to attend via Zoom, we'll have that information out for you. June 14th, you'll see notes from me. Again, the world's greatest Army is celebrating its birthday, and we do have many Army veterans here at the Ada County Highway District. June 17th is a big deal, a big day. That's our presentation in front of the P&Z for our USTIC maintenance complex. To date, it's gone very smoothly. We have taken into account and incorporated all of the P&Z's staffers' recommendations on that site. to include pathways, you name it, across the board as we move forward. Then June 22nd, it'll be a banner day here at the Ada County Highway District because we're doing our first, that's right, first in over a year, live all staff and such, properly spaced with all the appropriate precautions. We may be doing two, one here and then one at Cloverdale to make sure we have the appropriate precautions in place, but that's going to be a big deal. Next slide, please.
So, Director, are we doing anything on Juneteenth? I know we're doing recognizing a couple of other holidays down the road. We might consider.
Never missed it yet.
All right, Juneteenth is an important holiday.
Yes, it is. And again, never missed it yet. Based on your 7 current operational requirements for the Ada County Highway District, nothing's really changed from last week. Executing the budget is going to be a struggle. It really is. We think we can get there, but we'll keep you posted. But with the continued influx of projects and the redesigns that we're doing all appropriately and stuff, it's drawing things out, and we'll see how this all plays out. Our D&T team on the 25 workaround time, they're doing tremendous. And as I'll show you here shortly, the tsunami continues to hit when it comes down to development applications, permits across the board, but they are doing Herculean work there. We'll see how this continues to go through the summer. Next slide, please. For April, those are some of the main statistics across the board. Our retention rate is down. We said goodbye to 10. I believe 10 individuals this month, all to some to retirement, some to tremendous opportunities, some to family obligations, some to family businesses and such. So all doing great things across the board. But as I will share with you consistently, you have tremendous team members here who are very talented that are being poached across the board by private organizations. And as we were dealing with a couple here just a little bit ago, we're competing as best we can, but we will not be able to compete with billionaires that are offering some very great opportunities to folks across the board. However, we can compete very nicely when it comes down to culture, effort, family, atmospheres, and benefits, and some of the other things that I briefed you on that we're doing right now. We're seeing an uptick now in people wanting to come here, and I will share with you that I've already received some less than complimentary, pleasant, friendly phone calls from some of your other elected areas around here saying, "Why are you killing us?" And so they can do what they want to do too. The compliance training is great, and I want to compliment our legal team again. As I said during all staff, a 1% decrease in a turnaround for public record, it sounds like a little, it truly is huge. And such. So the legal team continues to push things out with all the right answers. Next slide, please. Commuter ride. Again, country's oldest single van pool operation, as you know, profitable, successful. This is what they've done when it comes down to not only moving people and such, which is one of the goals, but removing vehicles and improving the environment here at the district. So again, this is truly a big deal and very, very successful across the board. May in Motion's going well. I hope you'll all be able to attend in June when we celebrate May in Motion in June. Anyway, so your traffic team, as I said earlier, if you look at the traffic control requests, special events requests, which is going to skyrocket, because as you've seen in the media, all the cities now are planning events this summer to, again, celebrate the continued step back from the pandemic. It truly is amazing what they're doing. Next slide, please. Talking about your D&T team again and that tsunami, over 3,000 permits already issued to date, and we are a quarter through the year, basically, the calendar year anyway. Plan submittals are up, and I'll point again to your attention the status of your infrastructure here in Ada County. I kind of like that. One road in all of over 11,000 arterial miles is in poor condition. 4 out of 600 collectors and 25 of the 3,000 plus residential miles. again, this is a tremendous tribute to your maintenance team, your planning team, your pavement conditioning team, projects team. They do a tremendous job on making sure that the road infrastructure is in great condition for all users across the board. Next slide. So finally, I'll end with this. I truly believe in that statement across the board. You know, some old colonel said that and such. But as I ended the all staff with yesterday, it was again to thank the commission for their continuing support, their sense of humor, and their sense of humor when it comes down to a lot of things we do. And so with that, I'm more than happy to stand for any questions you might have at this point.
Mr. President,
Yes.
so I've also heard from folks about your tremendous strategy and being bold. So I've also been hearing that on the street, and I've been there's
bet you they were
several
nice.
really good candidates that have been applying to some of your positions as of late. So I
I'm
think
sure
your
they were-
strategies are paying off.
Well, I'm sure they were nicer to you than they were to me. Anything else? Okay, commissioners, thank you. And you have a couple minutes to take a stretch or enjoy some of the little goodies over there. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Ken, do we know anything more about that accident that happened yesterday at the street? Description was bad but unclear about what happened. Just curious. Well, it was a pedestrian where something said that a child fell out of a car and then was.
I bet your sister won't forget that. Yeah, she'll remember that. And your poor parents.
I don't know.
Gosh.
It's one of those memories that
But-
I was young enough.
Yes.
We used to have like a little.
Yeah, I bet.
We did,
Yeah,
and
little
it
A,
kept
little
losing
B.
time.
Oh.
So this one is.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Goodness, it ended well.
Yeah.
But she-
Move it over here.
I might be. Another one.
Oh, that,
All right, it's
Yep.
gonna be
back in the, back.
Director Wong,
Yeah. I think
time?
that's the way it was. Yeah. To tell the tale.
Mr. President, Commissioners, it's now 6 o'clock.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you all to the Ada County Highway District Commission meeting tonight. We will begin, as usual, with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the United States and to the republic. Again, welcome. We will begin our meeting tonight with a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. On the consent agenda, which we'll address next, items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion, and there will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizens so request, in which case the item will then be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless otherwise noted. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now for our regular agenda, we have one item, which is resolution number 2342, a vacation exchange of public right-of-way at 403 East 50th Street, the Patricia James vacation. There will be a request for an approval, and this is a public hearing. And we'll have a report on this from Dave Serdar, our right-of-way supervisor.
Mr. President, if I could just disclose, this was the property where it wasn't the owner, I think it was a relative of the owner, contacted me to tell me what to do about this last fall. And so I just want to disclose, I said, well, gosh, I didn't know it was even ACHD property, but the guy you want to talk to is Dave Serdar. So that I want to just disclose that for the record, and I haven't had any contact since.
Thank you.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, yes, they did talk to us, and we've got through it. So thank you for your time. For the record, David Serdar, right-of-way supervisor, ACHD. This is a vacation on 50th Street. The applicant is Patricia Ann James. ACHD received this application for a vacation for 0.11 acres. The appraised value of the vacation, is $21,000. ACHD has already received the $2,500 application fee. This is a site map of the area, and 50th Street is right here, and then this is Allworth that's coming down right through here. This is a more close-up view of the vacation. As you can see, the vacation is in red, and this is a large portion of the homeowner here's driveway, as well as some of the landscaping that's out here. This property originally came to ACHD in a Randall Acres subdivision plat in 1953. It's the only corner that was created like this. It's just kind of a unique situation. So, and this is just, we'll put all of the rest of the corners in pretty much looking the same as the other streets down the road as far as what we own. It is staff recommendation that the commission adopt and sign resolution number 2342 authorizing the proposed vacation of public right-of-way, as applicant has completed all staff requirements. I will remain standing for any questions.
Dave, I'm just kind of scratching my head. How did it wind up staying this way for so long?
That was my question.
President Goldthorpe, commissioners, what I've been told, part of the situation, and maybe Commissioner Hanson can elaborate, is there was a family member that never really did anything about it, and then I think one of the family members passed away, and then the other family came into, or the other parts of the member of the family came into it and looking at it and said, "What is this?" And that's kind of how it happens. And you know, we have some unique situations across the valley of stuff that's been platted, and we, you know, it's not really where the roads are. So this is kind of one of those. And
Okay.
the weirdest thing is I don't understand how everything else on the plat was that way and this was that way, but that's how it was. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. President, yeah, that was kind of my question. Is there any way of, like, I don't know, getting some bright young BSU student to go through and saying, here's all these other pieces of property you may not realize you own that is not on the tax rolls, rather than waiting for a property owner, I assume they wanted to sell it or do something, to come forward and say, hey, this is ACHD right away. We haven't been paying taxes on it for 50 years or 100 years or whatever. Is there any way we can kind of catch these? And I'd hate to think there's just a whole lot of property that ought to be put on the tax rolls out there. That
Certainly, President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, certainly that's a budgeting question. That's not really in my purview. Certainly, we as staff, I can tell you, I deal with calls like this almost on a daily basis, at least on a weekly basis. And sometimes there really isn't some easy answers for the people. And I will tell you from the staff's position is some of these are pretty hard for us because they're difficult situations, and we try to deal with them on a case-by-case basis the best we can. I think in the, you know, it's a matter of staffing, but having some clarity on this would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think that'd be good, especially if they're like, well, they're not going to raise a problem because they're not paying taxes on it, and if we're going to make them pay $2,500 plus then pay for it once we vacate it, it's like, why bother? But it might be worth it for us to just waive those fees just to get it on the tax rolls. So that we don't, and then, but it seems to me, I don't know if there's a lot of things like this out there or whether this is more of a one-off. But typically, the things that have come forward to us is because somebody wants to do something with property and they've discovered, what's this?
I think President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, I think there's a decent amount of these type of things. Not one that looks like this, but certainly alleyways are a big issue for me and my staff. There's a lot of alleyways that have been, through non-use, have been kind of claimed. Those type of things, they're out there. So we try to deal with them the best we can.
Thanks. No, you do a good job. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Any
Mr.
questions?
President,
Yes.
Yeah, I do have a quick question, Dave. In a case like this, I'm sort of thinking about this from the resident's point of view. When the resident comes along and they have to pay a $2,500 fee to file this application, and then on top of that, they have to pay the cost to purchase the property from ACHD. Is that what's happening here? Is that what the $21,000 is? So in this case, the application fee isn't deducted from the appraisal cost. They're paying both.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner McKinney, that is correct. I will tell you the application fee often doesn't even pay our advertising costs. By statute, we're required to run this in one of the papers. We're also required to do mailings. And as a matter of the district, we've changed from 300 feet to 600 feet to better make sure the public knows that we're out there. So we have changed those mailings from where everybody had to sign for them to where we send them to people, so they're not costing us as much money. But the $2,500 doesn't usually, it just barely covers those fees, the costs of doing the vacation. The costs of what the vacation is and the appraised value, I'm required by law, and I think it's $2,500. I'd have to talk to Mr. Price, but I'm pretty sure the statute is $2,500. Anything over that, I have to appraise, and so and I have to tell you what the value is, unless we're getting a vacation or exchange. And when I tell you what that value is, then it's into your purview as to what you do. But I'm obligated to do that as a staff member by statute. So.
Okay. Now, since this is a public hearing and there is an applicant, is the applicant here wants to make, I kind of thought that might be who you were. If you'd come forward, we'd like to find out what your name is, your address, and maybe what your feelings are on this.
Thank you. My name is Patricia James. My address is 403 East 50th, Garden City. And I apologize for being a little late. I got lost. The construction messed me up, so I missed a little bit of the very beginning. I apologize for that.
Not a problem. We get lost too.
Okay.
It's our own fault that we get lost. So how do you feel about all this?
Okay, like I said, I missed the very beginning, but I'll just give you a little bit of history. The property that I own was passed down from my parents, and I did not realize until I started this process that the little triangle cuts out of what I thought I owned, and I didn't ever hear anything from my family any different, and so for all the years that we've had that, we've maintained it, and kept the weeds down, kept it looking nice, and I don't feel like it's really of any value to anyone except me, and that is why I started this process, which has been, as you know, very costly and time-consuming, but I believe that I really have no options. I think, well, first of all, I've gotten a lot of assistance because I've had so many questions being a layperson that doesn't know about all this legal stuff. And I just have to tell you that Sherry at ACHD has been absolutely phenomenal. So helpful and knowledgeable and professional, and I just would really, like to recognize her for that, regardless of what the commission's decision is.
Oh, it's not a hard decision.
Well, that's a good thing. It's been hard for me, let me tell you. I feel like I should be an architect or an attorney or something. But anyway, so I don't know. I don't really have any more questions. I'd be more than happy to share any information that I have. I don't have a whole lot of information because this goes back so many years. I actually was born, raised, and still live. Well, I was born where the Expo, Idaho is now. My folks owned property there, and they were bought out by the county for the fairgrounds. So they purchased a place just a little bit west off of Marigold on it was a dirt road called Chelan, and that's where I went to school. And then after I got married, I stayed right here in the vicinity. So I go back a long ways to the days when I was riding my horse bareback along what's now the green belt.
Okay, this is cool. I love the history of this. I only have one thing to say. I wish this had happened a lot of years ago because it would have been so much less expensive. That's probably why Jim brought up his thoughts about inventory in these, so it doesn't get any worse for everybody going forward. Right. But thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Steve's standing up for some reason. He's our general counsel. Are you just stretching? Nope.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia.
This has been a pleasure. Usually people don't come to these, so it's nice to see you.
Well, it's in Garden City, right?
Yeah. Thank you.
appreciate your kind words about our staff member too.
Yeah, well deserved.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Steve?
Just wanted to remind the commission of a couple of points. One is, under the statute, you have to make a finding whether it's in the public's best interest to get rid of the property. And two, you most certainly have the discretion to charge the full value, to discount any fees, or not charge at all. And I don't represent her, I represent the Highway District. I'm just letting you know what discretion you have in going forward.
All right, well, that's
Thank you.
That's good to know, and that's news to me.
Me too.
Well, anyway, is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue, this item? Nope. Then I will declare the public hearing closed, and the matter is before the commission for a motion and decision, and maybe a discussion.
Mr. President, I think what I heard council say is we could apply the application fee, as Commissioner McKinney suggested, to the cost.
That's what I thought I heard too.
That's within our discretion to apply the, once we've
Mr.
made a
Mr.
public
President,
finding.
Commissioners, you most certainly, and you can also not charge any fee at all, including the fair market value.
Oh.
It's within your discretion whether to charge them for the value of the property.
If we did something that drastic, would it set a precedent?
No,
Okay.
Mm.
Then all right.
nope. I mean, the fact, in terms of the findings, the fact that the property owner is taking care of the property for a number of years that otherwise we would have had to have maintained, I think that there are differing facts in the situation where you could justify not charging any of the costs.
All right.
Case by case.
Then, with that in mind,
Mr. President?
yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was going to say, I'd be happy to make a motion to that effect unless someone else wants to beat me to it.
Well, I think first of all, the first thing to say is that the approving the vacation, that's an easy question. I think clearly we ought to approve the vacation, that's obvious. And then, as I was suggesting, I think very definitely, I would be inclined to at least reduce the cost by the amount of the application fee. And, you know, Mr. President, if you have another motion in that regard, I'd be happy to, you know, consider that as well.
I do, but anybody else have something to say?
Oh, you go for it.
I would be reluctant to waive the application fee, but my motion is to approve the vacation, Resolution 2342, vacation exchange of the public right-of-way at 403 East 50th Street, and maintain the $2,500 application fee and waive the other costs.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on this motion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Boy, I'm glad you came. If you don't know what
Oh,
just
Patricia.
happened, Steve will tell you.
And tell the mayor that we did a really good thing for Garden City.
Yeah. It's your property. You paid for it. That's what we just did. Merry Christmas.
Thank you for taking such good care of it all these years.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure meeting you.
All right. We will, we're done with the regular agenda. If there is public communications, anyone wish to speak to us, Stacy?
We have no one.
No one? And no one here wishes to? All right, then we'll adjourn this meeting and we'll take about 5 minutes to change over to executive session mode.
All right. Thank you. Take care, Patricia.
Thanks, Patricia.
Yeah.
That's a first.
Yeah. But